Today is Thursday. We want to have a Justice Thursday conversation, and we'll have two of them. One is happening right now. We want to talk about media complaints, and if you have a complaint against the media, how do you get it addressed? If you have issues against media, how do you get them addressed? That is why the Honorable William Oketch, who is the chairman of the Media Complaints Commission, is in the studio with us. William, good morning.
Good morning.
Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Asante. Thank you.
This is the hot seat of the Situation Room. Enjoy the privilege of being there.
Shukran.
City Muga has the day's proverb, and this week's proverbs are from Uganda.
Yes. One who was not there kills the buffalo. That's today's proverb.
One who was not there kills the buffalo.
Yes.
What do you understand from that? What's your interpretation of the proverb?
Quite interesting. One who was not there kills the buffalo. At times, when I think of it, at times what may happen, he who takes a shot may not be the person who ultimately serves the meal on the table. That's what I'm thinking. Yes.
He who takes the shot may not be the one who takes the credit.
Yes, ultimately.
That's one way of looking at it.
Indeed it is.
Yeah. The other one that City had looked at was?
Well, you know how it is that in a country like Kenya, everyone is an excellent prescriber and they know the solution to all things.
Exactly.
See, why did they not do this? This thing is obvious. Why aren't they doing this? Why didn't he score? The goalkeeper wasn't even there.
It was an empty goal.
He just needed to tap the ball into the goal.
Slowly.
Yes. Why didn't the coach put so and so? Yes.
You know, you're not the one who was holding the rifle, so you don't know.
That's a spectator.
That's the one who's not there.
That's the one who's not
the
there.
one who's killing the buffalo.
Yes.
Okay. Many interpretations to this.
Yes.
William, karibu sana.
Sure.
2 weeks ago, we hosted a lady called Rosemary Kuria, who is the chairperson of the Communication and Multimedia Appeals Tribunal.
Right.
Today we are hosting you, and you're the chairperson of the Media Complaints Commission.
Right.
Hiya. We mentioned you in that conversation.
Oh, great.
Now you're here. Tell us, what is it that your commission does?
Yes. All right. The Media Complaints Commission is set up under Section 27 of the Media Council Act. Foremost, I think it will be very important to recognize that under the media space, there are several players and regulators. You have the Communications Authority that deals with what I would call the technology aspects, the hardware, issues of broadcast licenses, signal distribution, telecommunications, postal, courier. That is the domain of the Communications Authority. Then under it also, where there is a decision maker, because the Communications Authority is a decision maker, you'll have to have a body that looks into the disputes if issues come up. So that is within that space. Now, the Media Council Act now deals with the software, what I call the software. And this is basically the code of conduct for the practice of journalists. This is the body that regulates the practice of journalism, regulates journalists, media practitioners, media enterprises. We have the Media Council, of which I know all or most of us are aware of, dealing with policy issues. And then there under also, we have the Complaints Commission. Now, the Complaints Commission now handles disputes and complaints that arise under the Media Council Act. And these complaints are three-faceted. If anyone is aggrieved by a publication or a conduct of a journalist or media enterprise, then they have the recourse to come and complain. The second tier of the jurisdiction of the Media Complaints Commission, the Media Council in its role makes a diverse range of decisions. It takes actions. Well, if anyone is aggrieved by a decision of the Media Council, then they have a standing right of appeal to the Complaints Commission. So it is two-tiered. We handle complaints emanating from publications, and publication in this context will be anything published either on the newspapers, print media, either on the broadcast, television, or even on the internet. So we handle those at that level.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the threshold of this a grievance? What do you then look for? Because anybody could just, pop out of nowhere and say, well, I feel aggrieved by 1, 2, 3. There must be, I am assuming, a threshold that must be met for you to say, okay, this one we will hear, or this is absolute rubbish. What do you look for?
Yes, of course, journalism being a profession, the so-called fourth estate, every profession, like others, doctors, teachers, every profession has what I will call a rule book, the do's and don'ts of what you need to do or not to do when carrying out that profession. So for journalists in this context and media enterprises, we have the Code of Conduct for the practice of journalism. It has several regulations, about 23, 24. Little need to book at times when you look at the abridged version. It talks of several rules. Accuracy and fairness, integrity, independence. So we are guided by the Act. The Act says any person, and a person in this context can be a natural person or a natural person like a company, an association. If you are aggrieved by any publication, all right, then you come and complain. So that is the first test. Then if you are also aggrieved by conduct, journalists also have obligations, both to themselves and to the profession. If anyone is aggrieved by the conduct of a journalist, then they can complain. So what I will call it is a sieve system where all we listen to you, we analyze, and if it does fall within the Act, then we take it up. If it does not, there are systems, there are standing MOUs with other bodies. The Media Council Act itself requires, if we realize that maybe it is a complaint that falls within the Communications Authority, we refer it there. Yes.
So what's the nature of some of these complaints that then you hear? Because I'm curious as to what are some of the kinds of things that then come to your doorstep when you hear, again, harping on these grievances or the aggrieved. What are some of the things that the complaints come in form of?
Quite diverse. We've handled quite diverse of cases. There are cases from ordinary Kenyans. There are cases from the high and mighty. Okay. Just to put it into context, we have had complaints, those of course which we have adjudicated upon. We have had complaints again by a parent, against a publication on the stories on their child, claiming that there was a breach of privacy. There was a famous story that was done with one of the media organizations of a child who had cancer, cervical cancer, and started menstruating, I think, at a very young age, 6, 7 years. It was the mother who was giving this interview, and within that story, this child was photographed. This child was identified. So originally, the parent, the father, it was in a context of a separated household. So the father was aggrieved that this story was putting him in bad light. Because, the mother gave this picture that I'm in this
She's all alone.
I'm struggling, and these churches or organizations, they've helped me. So initially, the parent came and this story has put me in bad light. But interestingly, in adjudicating that complaint, we moved away from the issues of this man and we focused on the interests
of the child.
And we gave decisions and directions on issues of privacy of the child, matters of consent when you're covering the children's stories. So that's just one. We've also covered stories.
Interestingly, before we move on to the next one.
Oh, yes.
Why did you shift from the complaint that had initially been brought to you?
Okay, not particularly shifting from the complaint. The complaint was there as it is.
Okay.
In our process, when a complaint comes, the first thing we do is called a preliminary analysis. We look on issues. One, do we have jurisdiction? Does it fall within the ambit of the code and the act? So once we do that, we admit it. Then we hear the parties. We held a hearing. So in the hearing, the issues of the complainant at that time were that the story depicted me that I'm not taking care of my family, that I neglected my family, that the publication was done without my consent. That was originally. So it was more or less a feud. But within that story, there was an innocent child that needed protection. And there were lapses. There were lapses from the journalist who had covered that story because there was no documentation of consent, even from the mother.
Yes.
That was lacking. The child was identified, identified by name, and the story was there, published on several platforms. And we looked at the effect of how, if this child could grow up in the future, these are stories which could be found. So we moved away from these issues of man, which really were not contraventions as such, to how this story was covered and the need to protect this child. And we even gave guidelines, and one of those guidelines was like there needs to be continuous training of journalists of how you cover and protect children. Yes.
Go on to the next case you are about.
Yeah, the next case, we have also handled cases of the high and mighty, if you wish to call them that.
We have such people in Kenya.
In quotes.
Hi, my friend. And why? Bullet. Let's hear the story.
One that comes to light, of course, there is the professor, the CBK governor, Patrick Njoroge.
Dr. Njoroge.
Dr. Njoroge, who had a complaint against one of the publications. There was a matter that was being handled by the East African Court of Justice, where the central bank was involved. So a particular report, I think, just picked a press summary of the judgment, then just transposed and published, and made some certain references which were not actually factual. Okay, so the complainant came and made his case. There was a hearing. It was very interesting because in this particular matter, an apology had been done, So the gist of the governor's complaint was that that apology is not sufficient, So it called upon the commission to interrogate and to study and to refer and to come out with a criteria on what is the adequacy of an apology. Yes.
And what did you say? Because usually when you see such complaints coming, the initial one that will come to a media house, it will say, publish an apology with the same prominence as the story that you had initially published.
Exactly.
What is that prominence? So what is your guideline on that?
We gave a guideline is that essentially when an apology is being made, one, the aggrieved person, has to be referred to. The specific publication that was complained about has to be referred to, and that apology has to be sufficient in terms of picking out what was wrong in that level, and thereafter, after picking it out, expressing and coming out and saying this was not intended, And also there was the issue of, because the original publication has a photograph, so the subsequent apology also has to have a photograph in that context. So that happened, and we gave directions, and we are glad that there has been compliance, And then I think the third other case, so that you see just how broad they have been. Also, we've had a complaint by a former Cabinet Secretary for Treasury against a publication, I think Business Daily, and this was in regard to certain purported loans, during the COVID pandemic area, certain loans that Kenya apparently had signed on to, So what happened in this context, I think the investigative journalist went to the Securities Exchange Commission in the US, which has a roster on agencies and securities and how people take those loans. So there was a mention of Kenya having taken or expressed an interest to take some loan. So that story was picked up, published. I think the misstep was that there was no reference, as to where that story came from. So I think the CS was aggrieved, came we adjudicated, and in that context, we looked at the issue of quoting sources, and also headline, because the headline could say something different, and yet the story is completely out of context. Yeah. So with that also we gave directions, and we are glad that there has been compliance.
The question that comes to mind as I listen to you,
Yes,
explaining very eloquently and very clearly, is at what point does one come to you, and at what point does one go to a court of law?
exactly. When you talk about the court of law now, that's an issue of defamation. Defamation generally is the publication of false and true statements to third parties. Okay, it is.
Can I just pause?
Yes, yes.
What constitutes falsehood?
This is
Before
what
we continue.
Yes. Of course, falsehood, it has to be untrue. It is not factual. It is untrue.
It lacks evidence. It lacks facts to support what you're saying.
Yes. A typical example, if someone comes and, because there has to be publication means it has to be related to a third party. If someone comes and says, William is a serial womanizer, was seen with so-and-so's wife, in this particular hotel, which is not true. I was not there. I was not with that particular person. And it tends to lower your dignity before the right-thinking members of society. It damages you. You see that? Now, that is defamation. It's a matter that is handled by the civil courts. Now, at the point where people come to us, because we enforce the code of conduct for the practice of journalism, because when you look at the Constitution, even Article 34.5 says that there is this body that will come in place and put standards to enforce professionalism in the media, being the Media Council. And that code has several do's and don'ts of the journalists. So essentially, if any person is aggrieved by a publication, they've been mentioned, okay? Essentially, we encourage that the first point ought to be the Complaints Commission. Why do we say that? Because from history, it has happened, while every person has the standing right to go and file for defamation, the risk is the ultimate damages in defamation can be punitive, millions of shillings, and that has a self-censorship effect. Because if a publication has been slapped with damage costs 30 million, 50 million, you're literally staring at bankruptcy. And that's why we encourage, under our legal system in Kenya right now, there's what is called alternative dispute resolution, wherein disputes should be solved at the nearest level to the source, so far as it's possible. And even when you look at other profession, this is a practice that has now gotten traction. When you look at tax issues, before one goes to court on a tax matter, you have to go to the tax tribunal. When you look at the environment, before you go to court, the Land and Environment Court, you have to go to the National Environmental Tribunal. So similarly, even in the media, if people have issues, you've been published, or an article has been written about you and you do not feel good about it, we encourage that first come and exhaust this mechanism at the Complaints Commission. And if you are not satisfied, our law still does provide any decision of the Complaints Commission is appealable to the High Court.
So, William, the Media Council Act and the Media Council, the Media Complaints Commission.
Yes.
You've told us it looks at publications,
Yes.
it looks at broadcasts, whether
Yes.
it's electronic TV, radio.
Yes.
It'll also go and look at other publications like, print.
Yes.
Does it go further into anything that we talk about communication or media? I'm thinking novels or books.
Yes.
If a book is written about, something and it mentions William in bad light, that portrays you in bad light, with the right thinking, the way you've said it,
Yes.
does it fall within the ambit of MCK and the Complaint Commission? If a play, a stage act, is acted somewhere in Kenya National Theatre and you feel aggrieved by the contents of a play, does it also fall within your...
No, it does not, because it is expressly excluded by the Media Council Act, which defines publication. Publication is any content which is either in the newspapers, radio, or in the internet, excluding book publishing and plays. I think those are under the Films and Stage Plays Act. Those ones are excluded expressly. So we only deal with content in newspapers, radio, TV, and on the internet and platform of those media enterprises. That is what we do handle.
From what you've said,
Yes.
the cases that come to you primarily seem to involve people who interact with the media, either because an article referring to them has been published,
Yes.
or something in which they were mentioned, etc., etc.
Yes.
Do you have situations where media houses bring complaints against another media house?
We have had a situation where a journalist has been a complainant, okay? Without naming specifics, but it was a very interesting case because a journalist in one of the media or radio stations in Western Kenya, he will have some shows, yeah? So then another media enterprise, a radio station in Nairobi, which has a program, I think, that is called Anua, something like that. So there's a lady who complained and said this particular journalist who runs this show had wanted to give me a job, but had made advances, sexual advances, before satisfying that offer, So then it was a call-in, They called this journalist and they said, we've been...
So radio station, Nairobi radio station...
Yes, called that
calls
journalist.
the Western radio station
Western.
journalist. Okay.
Yes. Then, we've been monitoring you, we've been looking at you, and looks like, can we do business together? Just laying the foundation. But then therein, they ask him, do you know this particular lady whose name so-and-so? Did you promise that you're going to give a job? And then I think without warning, it was online. And then that lady says, you wanted to sleep with me, something like that.
Live on air.
Yeah, live on air. You see that. So, and then there were commentaries in that show also, So that complaint came. And the journalist was aggrieved that it has depicted me in bad light, So at that level, normally, it's very important to mention that our law, the moment a complaint comes, and the moment we have processed and said we have jurisdiction to handle this, we emphasize on mediation. Because Article 159 of the Constitution talks about alternative dispute resolution, and mediation is one of them. So first stop, we urge the parties. Can this be sorted by way of mediation? The members of the of the Complaints Commission, I'm the chairperson, we have 6 other members of different capabilities, professions. They are all trained and accredited mediators. So if parties are willing to go through mediation, I, as the chairperson, will appoint a mediator, and the mediator will take them through that process. And we have had up to 8-10 cases settled by mediation at that level. Okay. Yes.
The thing that I'm hearing,
yes,
is that yes, this was aired.
Yes.
What was the journalist's complaint? Was it damage to his reputation?
Yes.
Okay. But does your counsel go further and seek to determine whether there was truth in the allegations that were aired and that were embarrassing to this particular journalist? Do you go into those details?
Of course, when any person complains, we have a complaint form where you particularize. What are you aggrieved about and what remedies you are seeking. So other than the claim that his reputation was damaged, there was also the claim that Those things were not true, were not factual. Of course, we have, because the law gives us the mandate to investigate and ascertain, and we do that. If mediation does not work out, because mediation is where parties will discuss and agree, and then we settle. But if mediation fails, the matter is escalated, it goes for hearing, Okay. So we take evidence, we call witnesses. There is the complainant case, which goes first. The witnesses, we listen to them. There's the respondent, the witnesses, we listen to them. The members of the commission also have the opportunity to interrogate and ask questions for clarification.
Okay.
They submit documents, we evaluate, we analyze.
What documents are you looking for? Are you looking at the conduct of the station, against the conduct that we have, the code of conduct?
Yes.
Or are you looking to establish whether indeed the allegation as made
It's true.
had merit?
And what if it was a mistake?
Yes. We look at two thresholds. One, if there's any provision of the Media Council Act that was violated, there are provisions there that requires certain conduct from journalists and media enterprises. Then the most important, we look at this rule book. Are there any provisions? There are rules on how, if you are to broadcast a telephone conversation, there are rules on how you are meant to do it. You need to inform someone that you are online and that this is what we are doing, So that is the threshold where we look at. So in terms of document, people can bring in recorded conversations, typed documents, whatever that they feel that will prove their case, and we analyze that.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's take a break. 26 minutes to 8. The Honorable William Oketch is the chairman of the Media Complaints Commission. He's here to tell us what the Media Complaints Commission does, and this is handling any complaints against the conduct of specific journalists or media practitioners or media institutions, or if you are aggrieved by the Media Council of Kenya itself. You go to this. This is what we are seeking to understand today. It's Justice Thursday. It's one of two Justice Thursday conversations. The other one happens in the next hour, 25 to 8.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Conversation continues. The Honorable William Oketch, chairman of the Media Complaints Commission, is our guest today. If somebody is unhappy with the decision of the Media Complaints Commission, where do they go?
They have a certain right to go to the High Court and complain. And just to tie it up with your earlier question, why us and not courts? Two distinctions that I can make. There are some issues which may both be offending to someone and inaccurate. So there are those aspects which we can handle at the commission, and someone genuinely also has a right to go to the High Court, and claim for damages. The distinction is simple. In the High Court, you'll have a mallet. You'll be hit quite hard. Us, we operate a policy of a feather, When you look at the sanctions in our law, Section 28, we deal with the issues of apology, correction. We can direct that our publication be published in a particular way. We make declarations on media freedom. We can issue public reprimands. In the worst of cases, we can recommend that a journalist be deregistered. And we also, depending on circumstances, we can levy fines. It is a maximum of 500,000 for a media enterprise and a maximum of 100,000 for a journalist. But that is the worst of cases. Ideally, we operate a policy that we are there to enforce the code and improve standards. That is what we are looking at.
And if someone goes to court, they could actually get higher than this.
Yes.
100,000 or 500,000, they can get higher.
Yes.
Okay. So you're also limited in terms of how severely you can punish somebody who has wronged. All right. What's the difference then between you and the Communications and Multimedia Appeals Tribunal? Because the chairperson then told us that in some cases, people can appeal decisions from your commission at the tribunal.
The difference is, as I stated, the Communication and Multimedia Appeals Tribunal, it handles complaints, in the decisions that are made by the Communications Authority. If someone has applied for a broadcast license and is denied, if someone has applied for a courier license, is denied. So any administrative decision of the Communication Authority is appealable at the tribunal. However, there's a misnomer that happened because I was part of this process in the formulation of the two media laws. At that time, there was hostility between the then parliament and the media industry as a result of the MPs demonstration, the issues of will MPs pay taxes or not. So part of the jurisdiction that the Complaints Commission has in listening to matters, publications and all that, part of it was copy-pasted and put in the Kenya Information and Communications Act, KICA, which now seems to have given it double jurisdiction to also handle complaints against journalists. It went to the High Court, and within that judgment, the then Attorney General was criticized because that was poor draftsmanship, essentially because it may lead to forum shopping, because with no journalists as they're comfortable with the Media Council, the issues can be handled there. It is a system of co-regulation, unlike the tribunal which issues fine of as high as 20 million, So that is basically, they should ideally handle hardware, broadcast licenses, signal distribution, telecommunications, courier, while we handle the software, we deal with the code of conduct, of journalists, ethical issues. That is the distinction.
Sure. I'm looking at some of these cases and they come before the tribunal, and it seems as though it's all premised on the assumption that somebody would have erred with some kind of malicious intent. And in many cases, that may not be the case.
Yes.
Where somebody did not have a malicious bone in their body, but made a mistake. How are you able to interpret from such and then deal on matters where, because we're dealing with human beings, where somebody actually did make a genuine mistake and somebody is seeking some kind of, recourse on someone's mistake when there was no malicious intent?
Oh, yes.
How do you deal with that?
Okay, first and foremost, primarily, in my experience, we came to the truthful realization that at times, all that a person needs is to just say, I'm sorry, this happened, Because most of the complaints emanate out of interests, competition, And at times, there could be maybe few instances of maybe backstabbing. But what happens, even if there was malice in a particular case, through that process, I mentioned mediation, adjudication, through that process and making the parties, engage each other, there are certain issues that are resolved. One particular case, there was a SACCO, which had bought some land, I remember, and they had a housing unit. So they're trying to promote women empowerment. Say, you save a particular amount in a month, then we build for you a house, then we'll give you that house and the key, So this circle promoted this thing in the newspapers, in the TV, But it did not mention that this complex, belonged to another circle,
What do you mean belonged to another circle?
Like,
so the circle that is actually that owns land and is developing the houses is not the circle that's in the media advertising for
you see,
Oh,
So this one was published. They show the gate. So the chairman of this other
owner.
one, came and complained. This is wrong. So in that level now there could be some malice. Because now you want to.
You're gaining for something that doesn't belong to you, essentially.
Totally.
Yes.
You see that.
Yeah.
But we realize at times when someone just say, okay, we are wrong, this happened, how can we deal with it?
Right.
And we realize at times it helps
Yes.
save situations.
Sure.
Which now brings in the issue of the media is an innocent third party here.
Yeah.
In terms of an advertiser coming and
Yes.
placing an advert, and you really have no way of verifying the information that they're placing in the adverts.
Yes.
If you come here and you say, I'm so and so, and I'm placing an advert here, we are looking for a CEO.
Reason why,
Yeah.
in the code, the editor has responsibilities, and even that particular case, we picked it out. The editor has enormous responsibility to verify facts, to ascertain, due diligence. On the surface, at least the editor has to demonstrate that there was some diligence, due diligence. Yeah, that is the threshold. Because at the end of the day, the hammer will fall on the editor.
Okay. I'm sure, I don't know whether this came to your commission. There was the issue of a death announcement, right? That was claiming that a certain personality had died.
Yes.
Name, photo,
Yes.
all the details put there.
Yes.
And it turns out that the person who's being named
Yes.
is, a known personality, but they're alive.
Yes.
So where is the responsibility there? I mean, what does the editor do? There could be very many people called William Oketch.
Yes.
If somebody comes with a death announcement and they want
Yes.
to put it in my paper and they all say William Oketch has passed away and family and friends are meeting,
Yes.
how do I know which William Oketch is?
Yeah.
talking about?
Of course, on that level, that was a very ripe one, a complaint that could potentially come to the commission. But that basically depends on the internal procedures of the specific organization. How do you accept these things? How do you verify? Do you record the name of this person who has brought this advert, And earlier on, I'd said the policy, the best way for the media is that issues to be solved as near as possible to the source of origin. So in that particular case, I remember there were discussions and negotiations, and out of self-regulation, the media enterprise itself can say, oops, we're sorry, this happened, but we will review and make sure that it doesn't happen again. So that is a form of self-regulation which we encourage. Yes.
The matter of complaints
Yes.
that we speak of, we seem to be focusing on either radio, maybe TV, maybe
Yes.
print media.
Yes.
What about social media?
I did state, when you look at the Media Council Act, in the definition of publication, even material published in the internet, we do have jurisdiction. Right now, increasingly, every organization has gone online. There is YouTube, there is Twitter. So even those complaints that arise from internet, we have that jurisdiction. There's a matter right now alive that is going through mediation that emanates from the Dusit terror attack, the publication of the gory images by an international media outlet, which happened. So two Kenyans, I think, came forward and they filed a complaint, and because they were offended by the publication of those photographs. Offended.
Did the offense go against any known regulations or any limitations that are contained within the code of conduct and the limitations that are allowed within the laws that govern publications in this country?
Of course, the code has regulations on how you cover such incidents. There are regulations on obscenity test, how you deal with those situations. It is well covered. But as a state, at this level, I may not say whether that particular one did or did not, because as I said, it's undergoing mediation. The parties are engaging each other. Then out of that process, we'll be able to know if there are any amendments to be made and the direction that it will take. But of course, there are guidelines on how, when you look this code of conduct, there are requirements on how, if you are covering such issues, and the use of photographs, particularly. When you are using photographs and pictures, there are certain obligations. When you even look at 20 use of pictures and names, especially of those terrorism and gory images, you need to make sure that you don't depict the idea that you are promoting, Yeah.
So it's not that the person is actually the one who was in the photo. the complainant is complaining about the conduct of the media house
Yes.
in publishing these photos.
Yes.
Okay. Which now brings me to the issue of cartoons.
Yes.
So, of course, in cartoons and caricatures, you can't say this is William who's been depicted here. You'd have to go to great length to actually prove it.
Yes.
But everybody looks at it and they can tell,
Yule Jama.
this is Yule Jama. Now, have you heard complaints against cartoonists and cartoons being published in our media?
Not that I remember. Not that I remember. We, as of now, we have not had complaints against journalists. What we have had complaints against radio breakfast presenters, even in that particular case that I mentioned, the Bungoma case, it was against breakfast presenters in Nairobi. And even previously, we have had complaints against a radio presenter who made some certain comments about a lady. There was a lady who I think got an accident at the University of Nairobi, though she died under very mysterious circumstances. And this issue was being discussed on radio and, all that. So the parent was aggrieved, So we have had those complaints, against radio morning breakfast presenters. Some are resolved at that level, but some come through for adjudication. Yes.
So now, when we look at what then is being asked of the aggressor in this case, is there really enough that could serve as recompense when you're saying, all right, I feel aggrieved because of 1, 2, 3, and in most cases, as you said before, what would make it better is just an apology, and an apology to be made in a public forum because the aggrieving was also done in a public forum. From a tribunal perspective, is that enough to take care of the situation and put the matter to bed? Is that usually enough?
Yeah, more or less, like I said, the psychological need of anyone, to be just told sorry, this happened and we are sorry. We take that blame. That unsolved almost half, but it may not be enough because we also encourage. I mentioned self-regulation. Like internally, you should have systems of how you sort with issues.
Yes.
So it's also important that we strengthen that aspect. That when issues come, you can sort it here, and it's a requirement also. You should listen to people and sort them. But sorry solves it so much in a big way, because at the end of the day, it's always not about the money.
But it still needs a tribunal to step in and to then mediate, to have that sorry being said.
Yes.
In most cases, all right, in any cases, do you find that the aggrieved party has maybe sought to contact the person that they feel or the entity that they feel aggrieved them before it comes to the tribunal? And does the answer come out as, well, we're not going to deal with that, or ignore it? So do you find that most cases that come to you are because previous communication channels had broken down?
Quite right, you're quite right. In fact, in one matter, a complainant had sought audience, came to the media enterprise, sought to meet the editor, and he was totally ignored, totally shunned. And even though the commission made a finding, there was a finding that, it is your responsibility to listen to the concerns and question them and answer them, So that is true. More or less, most complaints come because people are not listened to. You shut your door to them, you don't listen to them, so they have no option but just to come to us. One thing that maybe I need to emphasize, journalists also have a forum to complain against harassment, against destruction of the equipment, being denied access, but very few of them are taking this up. Because we have powers to even order for compensation and repair of equipment which have been destroyed. But very few journalists. Fine, you may have been assaulted. Let police deal with the criminal aspects. But also if your equipment has been destroyed, your camera has been taken, confiscated, come to the Complaints Commission. If you want to go cover some county proceedings somewhere and you are being blocked or harassed, come to the Complaints Commission. We will listen to them. Journalists, and this should go out to them, it is their commission. They also need to complain as much as the members of the public are complaining. Yes.
Every time I hear the word complaints, I don't, in the same breath, hear the word resolution.
Yes.
I just hear issues being brought about. Now, what if someone wants to complain about your commission? Where do we go?
Complaining about the commission.
Yes.
That is quite general. Will it be a complaint against a decision of the commission?
Yes.
Or
it has to be a decision, because I cannot complain about the
conduct of members of the commission.
Yes, everything that has to do with the work that they do. See, I know you mentioned that if one is aggrieved by the findings, one can go to a higher court.
yes, that is true.
Yes, but if my complaint has to do not just with your finding, but the manner in which you've gone about it, where do I go?
The Media Council Act has provisions for that. If in any way anyone is aggrieved against the manner a member, has discharged his duties, or myself as the chair, there is a provisions for the setting up of a tribunal. You make a petition, okay, to the CS, and the CS will look at it, and if there's credence, a tribunal is set up, because the commission is independent and it has protection of the law. You can only remove a member or the chair by way of a tribunal. So indeed, you can do it by way of a petition to challenge that and get the tribunal. The tribunal will take the evidence and listen to that. So if there's any breaches, then there'll be accountability at that level.
All right.
Yes.
William, for the last, let's say, couple of years, have you seen an increase in the number of complaints being brought before you, or are you seeing a decrease in that? How would you rate maybe awareness of people, the sensitivity of people, and the willingness to bring matters before you?
From my experience, because the current commission is running on a 3-year term, of which this is the last year, there has been a direct correlation between awareness and sensitization and uptake of cases, because so many people outside there are not aware that if they are aggrieved by a publication, they're not aware that they have recourse, that they can complain. But increasingly, if people are sensitized, if people are made aware, then there has been an increase of cases. And of course, this normally happens at pivotal times, because particularly even during elections, previously, 2017 it happened, and 2022 it happened. There has been an upsurge of cases because there is expanded coverage. Like in 2017, we had even contestants themselves coming to complain, that this person is the owner of this radio station, she's my competitor, vying against me, So we have handled those.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
We thank you very much, William, for
Shukran.
joining us.
Shukran.
The Honorable William Oketch, he is the chairman of the Media Complaints Commission. He's been here telling us, if you've got any complaint against media, content in the media, how you can have them addressed by the Media Complaints Commission. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Asante, shukran kabisa. Thank you.